Just played it with my family, mostly like throughout my years, played it a lot in middle school and high school. But for the most part, it was always just sort of a casual game as something that I really enjoyed. The big thing that really got me into like the content creation space was through League of Legends. League of Legends and also the Battlefield franchise, that's where I really started getting into things like writing through websites like Team Liquid and Dignitas. And from there, just started doing a lot of different things in esports journalism. Up until around 2013 to 2014, that's when obviously I wish I could give you a more exciting story, but it's honestly pretty boring in the fact that I'm just a documentary kid. I just got into the game like through seeing the documentary, got into it from watching the games at Evo, and the fact that also a lot of the teams that I followed in League of Legends, like Team Curse at the time, I think sponsored Hungrybox, and
Yes.
obviously Cloud9 with Mango. So I like got introduced like just from observing those like organizations picking up players on those teams. And for a while, I just religiously followed it. Like besides League of Legends was always my main game, but anytime there was a big Smash tournament at like MLG or anything like that, I, I always tried to tune in and watch it. And for the most part, for several years, I was just a casual observer, didn't really like attend tournaments or anything like that. But over the past like year or so, a lot of the websites that I write for now, as you mentioned, Esports Heaven and Invent Global, I've been talking with, and they're actually very excited about the prospect of doing more Smash content, since it seems to be something that's, as far as like the written aspect, there's plenty of great video work, but there's a lot of written work that I don't think is being done right now. So that's just the main thing that I'm trying to contribute to the scene at the moment.
And this brings up a good point. You were talking about how there's a lot of different videos being made on YouTube. I mean, for crying out loud, I'm subscribed to most of the well-known content creators and stream highlight channels for people related to Melee in particular, and it's daily. It's happening all the time. You could spend just hours and hours doing that. But then for the more maybe traditional is not quite the right word, but written articles happen a little bit less frequently. There are recaps and there are coverage articles for big tournaments that happen. But what you had done in particular is something that at first, when I first heard about you, was writing articles and also including interviews that you conduct with people from the Smash scene, and not just going on this weekend that happened just now. So and so won this tournament, was down originally 2 games to 1, but then made the comeback, and we keep it moving. So, is that something that you've seen? There's a vacuum, and I want to fill it.
Yeah, because and that's actually something that when I've talked with a lot of different personalities, like when I've talked with Ice or when I've talked with Mike Hayes recently, they
Mm.
do say that for the most part, interviews usually boil down to either just like, oh, like, so did you think you did well this tournament? Or even just questions like, oh, so you play Fox. How is that as a character? Is that a good character? Why do you play Fox as opposed to like Mario or something like that? But yeah, and that's something that you see like in esports as a whole is that not there is a gap in terms of actually really detailed interviews. Like, granted, in League of Legends, there is a system where basically to get like interviews for the highest levels. I'm not sure how familiar you are with League of Legends, but like we have the LCS and the LEC. Those are the two big like leagues in the Western world. Getting interviews there, you're only given like 8 to 10 minutes. So your questions usually have to be like pretty watered down. But what I really love about the League of Legends, or I mean, rather the Smash community, is the fact that players are willing to talk as long as you want, and that's what I really try to do and try to like gain value from is like take advantage of that opportunity. There's a journalist I really respect in League of Legends and Counter Strike named Duncan Thorin Shields. He has the Grilled and Reflection series, which is basically like hour-long series. And that was something that I saw that really wasn't taking advantage of Smash. Like, granted, it's not video interviews because I don't think I'm as experienced with the video format as I am in written content. So I just really wanted to do that, just like long form interviews with questions that are really personalized and really pointed. And so far, the community has really seemed to resonate with it. So, gonna just keep trying to see how long we could take it.
And so, to honor the watered down question format, you talk about how people don't like being asked, so why'd you choose Fox? Is it the ears or trying to be kind of done with it? Why'd you do writing? Why writing?
For me, I mean, I guess it all just depends on, like personality type. It all depends on like what you're good at. Like talking for me and being able to talk for long periods of time. I hope I'm doing a decent job. But for me, video formats and just being able to talk for long periods of time, I think that I'm okay at it, and I hope to explore more in the future and hopefully get better at it. But for me, writing has been something that's always just come like very, very easy. It's just something that I've always loved. Just growing up, going to school, that was always like one of my favorite subjects. And in terms of the content that I really enjoy, I do a lot of interviews right now, but what I'm most proud of and what I find most fulfilling is doing stuff like long form stories and like long form feature pieces. I can send, you could share it like in like a link in the chat, but the piece I'm most proud of is actually like not an interview, but rather just a feature based off Amza that basically just talks about his story and just like how incredible the fact that he plays Yoshi and how he's a Japanese gamer that is able to compete at such a high level despite all the different difficulties that come with that. That to me is just like the most fun to write, just like dedicating hours to get things perfectly in line and just perfectly the way I want it. That's like the most fulfilling thing to me.
So, with the AMSA article in particular, it's a great one to talk about since you're the most proud of it. It's probably the easiest one for you to go into dive in a little bit. How long did it take to write? How long did it from start to finish when you push it out and publish it?
It's kind of a hard question to ask because, or hard to answer rather, because when because you have to consider the amount of like knowledge base coming in because there have been pieces that I've written where basically I was just told, okay, write this story about this person, and it's someone that I have absolutely no idea about. So you have to dedicate like tons of hours of like research into that, just like finding out what sort of angle you want to get. For me, a lot of the actual research was just from following him. It was just because Amza was always someone that I was really interested in. So for the Amza piece, I would say that the research itself wasn't that difficult. And what I found is that if it's a subject that does really speak to you and is something you're really passionate about, a lot of the writing can sort of like flow out of you. So I would say it was, if I remember correctly, it's about like a 2,000 word piece. I probably, from start to finish, probably was something like 15 to 20 hours or so.
And then, like you said, if it's something that you're going to need to have a little bit more research and understand context, not just looking up tournament results, but watching back on VODs, trying to capture what the day was like for tournament performances, and also like you deep dives on social media for that person that the subject that you're writing on, probably takes significantly more time, like pushing 100 hours to get to 2,000 words. Does that sound accurate to you, or is it somewhere in the middle?
Um, It depends on the piece. I can tell you that I don't want to spoil who it's about, but I do have a very, very long feature on a Melee player that's coming out soon. That is something where not only did I like you said, like research pods and stuff like that, but I also talked to like many experts, like many of the friends of that player, many people that played his particular character. So yeah, that was something where it was like a significant time sink to probably, I wouldn't say 100 hours. That would be kind of, that would be like quite a time investment, but it was definitely like approaching something like 30 to 40 hours, I would say.
Wow. That's it. That's almost pushing 2 days. Like just imagine doing 2 straight days of going. At the end of 2 days, I will have written one of the best Dagum articles in the entire world, but I will also have had no sleep and I would have been staring at a screen for like 40 plus hours. Does that sound appealing to you at all or
It's a lot
no?
of fun though. It's a lot of fun. Sounds appealing to me. I love it.
That's awesome. So I had on Dylan Tate, who writes for Upcomer, and just hearing about how one of the things that he felt like at the time anyway. Hopefully he would answer differently now, that he felt like interviews were one of the things that he was a little bit on the weaker side for, not because he didn't take education for it, he's going to school for journalism, but because he just feels like, in terms of especially recording it for video or for just audio, like there's just a certain amount of conversation carrying that you have to have. And it's something that I said to him, I don't know if I would say that that's a natural thing for me. Sometimes I have a 2-minute conversation and I have no idea how to keep it going, but then other times could talk to somebody for like 3 hours. It most of the time it tends to depend on who I'm carrying the conversation with. Would you say that wanting to write is more because of that's what you enjoy, or do you feel like a natural like you want to avoid trying to inject any more of yourself into it by putting into video form or for audio? Is writing just where you feel like it's the most in that control box that you have, if that makes sense?
Well, the one first of all, like the one factor, it's not as like romantic, but the one thing is that it's just beneficial for SEO, in terms of like getting to have clicks on it and having eyes to see it. Video can sometimes be a lot more challenging, so that's like factor one. What I will say though is that before I used to do just directly written interviews, where basically I would just send a list of of questions, and then I would have people, I would just have players respond back. They would just like type out all of the responses, and that was like where I was trying to do sort of what you were saying, where I did sort of, I guess, like sanitize it and sort of like condense it down as much as possible and like make it so I was like completely out of the piece. But what I found over the course of as I've gotten more experience with it is that I just way more enjoy just hopping in a call on Discord like we're doing right now with whoever the player personality might be, and just like hashing it out with them, just having like an authentic conversation and then transcribing it to text. Like it could be released as video, but I just find it like I feel like, as I mentioned, like there are certain just business aspects where it's more beneficial to do it as a written piece. And also, I just find myself to be a lot cleaner because, I do have a tendency to ramble. So the questions come out a lot more like concise and uh, condensed down when I have it in a written format. But I would say that it actually is important to have have your personality as the interviewer in the interviewer, to have it more be like a conversation than just like 10 like random questions from the ether that are pulled out and given to someone. It is way more interesting for the reader to actually have it be like a conversation between two people, I would say.
And also ride the line of trying to tell a story or build a narrative to have your piece sort of lead the reader, the consumer, to a certain spot. Not that you're trying to deliberately like lead the audience, the consumers on, but you're not just going to put something out and try to be neutral. It won't pop off the screen or the page as well, or at least that's what I sort of think about when I conduct interviews. I go, I don't want to like I don't want to say like something radically ridiculous and a hot take and be like, and that's the direction the community's headed in, right? Right? Oddball, that's what we're doing. I don't necessarily want to put it like that, but how much do you think about telling a story or building a narrative when you're conducting your own interviews?
I mean, sometimes you do want to ask questions. Like, I mean, for example, the ICE interview went over like very good on Reddit and very well on social media. Mostly because, and it was because it was something that shocked me and shocked the community. The fact that the person that has been like Armada's boy for like several years, like been one of his best friends and been like definitely in the Armada camp, he was like, oh, I think Meng was probably the GOAT at this point. Um, Obviously, it would be too clickbaity if you just tried to bait out a bunch of responses and tried to get like controversial opinions just left and right. And I feel like after a while that might work in the short term, but after a while the community kind of sort of sees where you're coming from. If like every single time you see an oddball piece, it's just, oh, this player is saying something controversial, like again, like it works in the short term, but in terms of like actual credibility, you do need to have like a balance. where you do want to have stuff that is like interesting and will want people to actually like read your article and be the type of stuff that people want to read, but you don't want to just have the entire article just be baits and trying to get like just you know have as many clicks as possible on it.
Yeah, especially like the obvious part of that is the headline or I don't know how many articles always have thumbnails, but I guess maybe they do on Twitter links. But the whole idea in one sense is to say we are going to just get as many people into this page as possible, and it doesn't really matter much after that. But when you're talking to somebody like Ice, who's very integral, especially in the EU melee scene, you're not going to bring them on just to be clickbaity about it, or I don't know if I would always say that clickbaity is like blatantly disrespectful to the person's time or what have you, where you kind of make them feel
Mm.
used for the quotes that they give, but that is one way to do it. But then I think what you've done a really good job of thus far from the articles that I've read of yours is writing that line where you're like, oh, this is a great quote. We're not going to hide this, but not necessarily trying to take where it goes to and then just to get people in, artificially push it in a stronger take side of that pendulum, and for the only purpose of bringing people in. So that's really cool. While we're talking about that kind of stuff, I will ask you to put your camera, like if you're on a laptop, just bring it down a little bit, and yep, right about there is good. Yes, perfect.
Like
You look great.
sorry about that.
No
I
worries.
can't see my
You
camera.
can't see yourself. So that
Yeah.
is a challenge. I am trying very hard to anyone who's watching on working on that. Okay, so I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Amsa just because that's a player who has interested you, and you have no doubt watched Amsa's performance at the Summit 11 that just happened about a month ago already. It's August it's August 17th today. Oh
Yeah,
my goodness.
getting there.
Yep, it's getting close. So, what do you remember from that weekend, if it was specifically watching AMSA or the grand finals, which of course are already legendary? What do you remember from that particular weekend?
To me, the biggest things that I really resonated was seeing Act finally like perform. Like that has been one of the most heartbreaking things. Is I am someone that's like a big low tier supporter. That's why I like people like Amza and people like X. And I know that X has had a really rough time like the past year. The fact that it just doesn't really seem to he doesn't really seem to enjoy online play. So I would say that the thing that I'm really most enjoyed about Summit was just watch like because there is like a certain degree where you do have to put like stock and value into online results, but was nice to see like a lot of people that were being kind of like dismissed, Hungry Box, the Act, those type of people. It was nice to see a bit of a comeback. Granted, none of them had like the greatest performances like that we've ever seen. Like none of them won summit or even like made finals or anything like that. But that was the most memorable part, and the fact that obviously Mango smashed that.
It was an amazing grand finals performance on and losers run on Mango's part. But what do you think of when you hear like I'm sure you've heard of this where Hungrybox is on stream like maybe right before the tournament, right after the tournament, and he's going, yeah, so apparently this whole time I've actually had like a 12 or 13 frame delay for my headphones to hear audio, which is kind of a big deal for me. We're all going, are you kidding me? Is that the reason? Is that the nerf that we've all been debating back and forth the entire quarantine for? It has been something that I've seen many, many different discussion points throughout podcasts and videos of just going like, what's going on with Hungrybox? And of course, the same applies to Axe as well, because they both are in the United States and so should have decent connection with other United States players. But like you said, it not that it's the same exact reason for Axe, but when you think about something like that for Hungrybox, is it just like, what's going on? Or is it more of like, come on, man?
I mean, I feel like that was kind of him grasping at straws. Like, granted, he did make third, but it doesn't look like the Hungry Box that like we had had before the pandemic happened, like when he was just winning every single tournament. I do think that the online, I do think that Hungry Bucks still is like probably a top five player. I don't think many people would contest that. But I mean, just the fact that so many players are getting constant puff practice, and the fact that I mean he almost lost IBDW in addition to like losing to Mango and Zayn. So I mean it's gonna be a difficult road for him. I could see him still like taking like tournaments every once in a while. I think he's probably gonna revert back to like 2013 to 2016 era where he's always going to be like in the top of standings and things like that. But dropping sets again, and there are going to be players that are very hungry for him that will probably um, be able to take him out more. It, I mean, part of the aspect was also that he dedicated so much time to Ultimate and was too busy making tens of thousands of dollars just from streaming and stuff like that. Uh, I feel like that's definitely was a big incentive for why he wasn't as much of a presence in online tournaments. But yeah, I think he's definitely better than he was in online, but I just can't see him being like the number one undisputed again.
I think that there was a good chance of Hungrybox being able to ride that wave for maybe one more year if the pandemic never happened. This is something that I've thought of before with Hungrybox specifically. Not to derail the fact that we're talking about you, but you are a well-learned individual on all things Melee and Smash. So I think about what if the pandemic had not happened. Obviously, that would be great for a bunch of other reasons, but in Hungrybox's camp, would that have enabled him to bounce back from Genesis 7 after losing to Zayn, winning Summit 8, if I were, no, Summit 9, excuse me, and then being able to take 2020, then maybe get knocked off this year. It's just already insane that he was number one, ranked number one 3 years in a row in Melee. I thought that was incredible. And there are factors of why maybe players like Leffen and Mango and obviously Armada retiring in 2018 might have led to that happening, but he still was the player who, more often than not, won the tournaments that he entered. So yeah, I love I love thinking about that sort of thing. Does that carry any weight with you, or do you think that Zayn would have transferred the momentum he gained in 2020 online if there was no pandemic? That Zayn would have ended up at number one or at least ranked above Hungrybox.
It's hard to say because I do think that it wouldn't have just been a factor of like because a Hungry Box probably would have been able to find an answer to Zayn at some point. Like I don't think that he would just like it would be Zayn winning every single tournament and Hungry Box just never being able to answer. Mango, like I think it was at Mango's birthday party, he like demonstrated that he was able to beat Hungry Box. IBDW could do it, Axe could do it, um, Amza could even do it. There were definitely plenty of players that were already able to start like dropping into losers bracket, and it could probably um, stop him from making a losers bracket run. So I would probably agree with you that, but just like for a different reason, in the fact that it wasn't just saying. I just think that everybody, like the entire top 10, everybody was catching up, or at least not necessarily catching up, but able to find an answer to him.
Right, because if you're not getting frequent top player puff practice, this is the time when Toussaint was the second best puff, and in many ways, probably very likely still is. I mean, I'm also thinking about solo battle, right? Solo battle over in Europe, but it's interesting to think that there would have been, if there was no pandemic, whether or not there would have been that year or even this year when everybody officially caught up and was able to kind of stay the course in a set with Hungrybox when they're right next to each other on the same TV. I think that's what happened a lot at Summit 11, and I think this has been said before where players were going, it's just different, and having to get used to playing in person again, having to get used to playing against Hungrybox in person again. It is definitely a different beast where you're not scared of the pop off per se because Hungrybox isn't gonna like faint in the room with you or anything, but just it's different when it's in person for sure. But I didn't want to forget AMSA. So AMSA had a great opportunity going into the final day to kind of make a run there, and it didn't end up working out ultimately. But I would say overall, AMSA had a great showing, despite Mango's SD. That's still great that he went game 5 and was able to win. You know, we take those if you're AMSA, especially going game 5 against Zane and then ultimately losing that, but just showing that despite the fact that AMSA wasn't able to do much practicing and playing specifically against US based players during the quarantine phase of everything, came over to Summit 11 and was still able to show really well. So exciting for you, I'm sure. Did you want to wrap up your thoughts about Summit 11 and AMSA's performance there?
Yeah, I mean, Amsa was obviously just at a significant disadvantage. The fact that he wasn't able to play against many top players for such a long time. So, I mean, yeah, it's tragic. Like a lot of the things were just heartbreaking to see. The fact that he had to like fight his best friend Axe in that one set, and also the fact that there were a lot of like heartbreaking game fives. But I mean, it should be celebrated the fact that I mean, obviously everybody knows at this point the fact that he's able to do this with Yoshi, but also taking into consideration that he was able to do all of this without arguably like without any sort of like practicing resources that every single other player has. It's incredible.
Super, super cool. And those reverse eggs off the ledge. I can't believe that he's able to consistently do that now.
It's yeah, the dude's inhuman.
But so, yeah, absolutely so cool to watch. And we're moving now into the part of the year where it's going to be September very soon, like in a couple of weeks soon. And there are some majors that are in person coming up. And we obviously don't know what the pandemic is going to continue to do as the weather changes it's in the northern hemisphere in the United States, and that being what it is, with the events that are supposed to happen, the first one upcoming being Riptide. What do you think is a way that you want to see the storylines of Melee progress, and what do you think is actually likely going to happen, like either a winner or something else that just sort of happens that you're expecting or that you want to see come out of Riptide?
When it comes to Riptide, I think that it's going to just be, I think it's not so much that it's going to have like, obviously there are going to be some, uh, just like storylines for itself, but I really do think that it's more the continuing storyline of the offline era, the fact that it is returning again in some capacity. Like we're probably going to see Axe like bring it back again and just like have like another very strong performance. We're going to see a lot of we're going to like see the clash between players that didn't do well in the offline era or the online era rather, competing against people that were just sort of, people like IBDW that were really able to thrive in that period. That to me is going to be like the main thing we're going to see. Except like this time it's going to be way more people instead of what we were limited to when it comes to Smash Summit, and also just being able to finally have an audience again. I mean, that's going to be the biggest thing, is because I think so many players miss that, like just being able to have like the energy of the crowd. It's going to be like a huge celebration in that terms, like not just from the competitive aspect, but just from the cultural aspect. All the commentators I've talked to, they have not really enjoyed like the online era very much. So there's just so much to celebrate, just actually having a huge crowd of Melee fans again.
Speaking of energy from crowds, what are some esports events that you've been to where you could really feel that energy and where it's been memorable to you all these years later?
Oh, easily the biggest one is season 3 World Championships of League of Legends, where SKT T1 beat Royal Club. That's where I got to go to the finals and see like that was Faker's first time winning the World Championship. That was just a seminal moment, and that was my first time ever going to like a big esports event. So being able to go to one at Staples Center with like tens of thousands of other nerds like me, that was like incredibly special. I got to go to a couple of the Pats houses in San Diego, um, which is they had people like Hungrybox and Mewtwo King, so that was like my first time seeing people like those. That was like really special. Um, probably those two were the most significant to me, though, I would say.
Are there any events that you'll be trying to attend later this year, trying to capture that energy again?
I'm probably gonna see if I can make it to main stage. It all depends on like flights and stuff. Currently, I live on the East Coast, but I have family on the West Coast, so I'm gonna try and make it to main stage. I think that that would be a lot of fun. The only thing about Riptide that's just kind of difficult is that, I mean, it's. Do you want to just ask it again, and we'll just go from there, or?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, what are some events that you're trying to make it to later this year?
The biggest thing I would say is that I want to try and make it to main stage. I have family on the West Coast, currently living on the East Coast, but um, that's like the biggest one that I want to attend. I want to try and make it to Riptide, but I mean, the fact that like Sandusky in Ohio is not really the most accessible of places. I mean, it's cool that it's like in a water park and stuff like that, but um, that's like kind of a big ask to me. But I'm sure that it's going to be I'm sure it's going to be a hype tournament, but I just can't personally make it there.
Where is it going to be? At a water park. Oh, that's so cool. That's really awesome. Yeah, where? It's in Ohio. Oh, that's
Yeah.
more. That's more. I mean that in the semi nicest way possible. But as a Pennsylvanian, I don't really care to give Ohio a whole lot of props. The same way I don't want to give props to New Jersey or to New York or Delaware or Maryland or do we border West Virginia? We probably border West Virginia. Yeah, I'm a big Pennsylvania person, so I know I that doesn't necessarily apply to what you're saying. Riptide is not going to be the destination point for other reasons other than the fact that it's Ohio for you, I'm sure, but for the fact that you're working as a staff writer at it's not Esports Haven, it's Esports Heaven. I'm sorry, I think I
Esports
mispronounced
have it.
Esports Heaven. Like, do you just go to them and say, "So we're paying for my flights now to go to these events, cover," or is it just more of like you're gonna need to do a lot of the legwork yourself and write awesome, excellent articles that we know you can do, Oddball?
It all depends. Currently, a lot of sites like sort of have budgetary issues, so that is like a big concern. But also when it comes to like when you have something like League of Legends World Championship or Counter-Strike or things like that, that's a lot easier of an guaranteed like press passes and guaranteed interviews and stuff like that. I love the fact that Smash doesn't have those type of things. But that is something where it is like a harder ask, is because it is sort of more a Wild West mentality. Like I could pay for them to pay thousands of dollars for me to go to Riptide, and then I could approach like Hungrybox and say like, hey, let's like have an interview right now, and he could just say, no, I don't want to do that. Like it but I mean that is part of like I mean that's what I do love about the Smash scene is that in comparison to other leagues, at least for what I'm like experienced in like League of Legends, they basically have a Discord server. You fill in the requests that you want for that week, and then people are forced to interview. What's so awesome as a journalist about the Smash scene is the fact that you have to go out hunting. You have to approach players on Twitter. You have to send them an email. You have to approach them in real life. And yeah, that probably leads to more no's, and it's very uncomfortable if someone like says to you, "No, I don't want to do that. Like, please stop bothering me." But when you do get an interview, like not only are you fostering a lot of skills as a person and as a journalist, but when you do get an interview, you're getting a lot better of an interview because that person actually wants to talk to you. So to get back to your question, I would obviously that would be an awesome situation, and I hope that it happens. But it is just a bigger ask because from a financial perspective and from a business perspective, it's just not. It's
Right. So there are other events that are coming up that are going to carry a little bit more weight and have a little bit more panache, I guess. The fact that we have main stage for as an example where there are spots to the next summit for each game for ultimate and melee on the line, like the top placing players from both of those games are going to get an automatic invite because they're qualifying spots into the next summit. So Summit 12 for Melee and Summit 4, I guess that would be. Oh, but before we talk too much about main stage or just looking ahead, well, I want to look ahead in the shorter term. Here in the end of August is going to be the Summit Ultimate Summit 3, which just finished the voting phase. So now all the players have been decided, and I don't have that information in front of me, but there are going to be the top players like MK Leo and Tweak and Meister and a host of other players who have been invited or been voted into the event. So that's very cool. Congratulations to all of you. I was curious though, from your perspective, how do you react to the fact that already Ultimate Summit 3 has a bigger overall prize pool than Smash Summit 11, the Melee Summit that just happened, did?
I think it's expected. I think that the Ultimate community has really been like looking for a big event. Obviously, we've had like lots of different like things with Smash, where like the prize pool has been like pushed, and this is really, in a lot of respects, like one of their first like major tournaments. So in some degrees, uh, uh, it does make sense. Also, the fact that it has had backing from people like Critical and people like that, that have been putting behind it, that obviously explains a lot of the financial aspect, I would assume, at least considering how big of a name that is. But just like from my opinions of it, I think that it's a great thing. I mean, granted, I'm not as much invested as Ultimate as I am in Melee. I am trying to put more Ultimate articles out. I put a few. I had an interview with like Coney a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, but I would say just, it's good not only that it's, like rising tide lifts all boats and all that garbage, but in addition to that, I mean, I think it's also just good from a competitive aspect. It can't just be Melee always competing with itself. I mean, you saw this in Smash 4 when like with Evo and Apex, you would always just see like every single year it would be like Melee has the biggest, then Smash has the biggest, Smash 4 has the biggest, and stuff like that.
Right.
So I think it's just like from a competitive aspect. Hopefully, Smash Summit 12 can come back and overtake uh, this iteration of Smash Summit Ultimate or Smash Ultimate Summit. But yeah, I think just from a competitive aspect, it's great to see, and more money invested in the scene is always a good thing.
Always a great thing. And what I really like is that it's going to an organization that cares about the event that it's running. You can tell that the Beyond the Summit team actually is trying to make the event as awesome as possible, address competitive concerns and content concerns, trying to present the best product, the best tournament, and the best moments that you could possibly have. And of course, the proof is in the pudding. A lot of the summits in the past, especially on the Melee side, have had a part in having really big prize pools where it just seems to kind of like break the record on itself as each year passes and so on, leading to Summit 11, which for Melee, that was the biggest and will be at least until Summit 12. I would be surprised. I'd be very surprised if that beat itself any sooner than that. I'll just put it that way. So it does mean, like you said, that people care enough in terms of the grassroots to contribute. So have you ever been tempted to write an article on the people, or is that too general of a subject when it comes to the Melee community? Do you like focusing on one player or even a doubles team, a crew? Have you written about a bigger subject than just one person? I also would wonder that too.
I have, I mean, as just like just being like a regular journalist and still being someone that's like trying to make a name for themselves, there does come a degree of where editors need to just do like the like less risky of subjects, and also, you can't always just do passion projects at the time. What I will tell you is that I have had subjects where I have wanted to focus more on the people. I've always been really interested in like Korean gaming culture, and I wanted to do like a long uh like history piece about history, I guess, about like the history of Korean Melee and Korean Smash, like the Smash scene in general, and just interview a lot of the players there and see like what the future of that like holds. That stuff just unfortunately isn't necessarily the most eye-catching. I would say that it's still stuff that people would find interesting and that what people would really like if they gave it a chance. but it needs to be something that you earn. People need to know when they read something by Oddball that it's going to be good. And I've been trying to do that, and I hope that I've made progress, but I'm just not there yet at that point. I need to release like a lot more stuff that my editors will enjoy, and that my editors will approve of, and also stuff that will resonate with the community, that the community will enjoy. And then once we get to that point, once I've like built trust with Smash readers, then I'm gonna hopefully be able to tackle subjects like that.
That sounds like something that would be really cool to see down the line for you. But yes, to a certain extent, you can't. Well, we all would have a hard time making a splash in Melee or in Ultimate in the same way that Samox did, where I wasn't necessarily involved during the making of. I know that he had a couple of GoFundMe's or Kickstarter kind of operations going on to say, hey, I'm making this documentary. And the community was like, but then it comes out, and of course, well, here you are. And it must be extraordinarily difficult when you say to yourself, there's like 5, 10, 100 ideas that I have of different things that I would love to write about, but in due time and being patient about it, do you try to save ideas that you have by putting them down on a note somewhere, or is it just whatever's most important will rise to the top and be at the forefront of your mind?
Oh yeah. It has to be like a balance. There are like some journalists, like the one that I mentioned, Thorin, he like for the most part is basically able to pick and choose all the pieces that he was able to do. What I will say, for a long time, I did in League of Legends and Smash, I just wrote like exclusively passion projects where it was just 100% like, this is the subject I want to write about. Not necessarily anybody cares about this right now. It's not like trending on Twitter. It's not something people are discussing. I just really like it. I'm going to write about it. I don't care. I did that, and it's very fulfilling and it's very enjoyable. It's not really something that is going to pay the bills long term. It's not something that
Mm.
is really sustainable. So it's just getting to the point where right now I still try to probably have like one passion project just all running and try and like dedicate a good amount of time to like writing that and stuff. And then at the same time, I'm also trying to find stories that are stuff that people in the community are currently discussing, things that about like people that the community are currently discussing. That's what really resonates with the community, and like is what people for the most part want to see, I guess. So that's like the main focus. But to answer your question in the briefest terms, yes, I have so many ideas that I want to get to, but a lot of them do have to just like be put on the back burner in order to get to the stuff that's really hot at the moment.
Yes, because even though you want to look backwards and capture so many stories, then history continues to be made. Not every day per se, unless, well, yes, streams are important. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, I mean, most of the time afterwards nobody's going to necessarily go back and watch a full one. I'm just saying. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the documentary, the one that brought you into Melee. I know that there were also live events that you watched around that time and afterwards, like the big Smash events like the Apexes and the Evos, but do you remember watching it at like where you were, or like what you thought of it specifically at that time, or would you rather look back on it now as someone who's been involved in Melee for almost 10 years now?
Do I remember where I was when I watched it?
Sure. Or what you think of it now if you've gone back and watched it since.
Oh, I've watched it like probably like 4 or 5 times or something like that. I don't know how much familiarity you have with other esports, but what was significant about the Smash documentary as a whole to the greater gaming esports like competitive gaming community is that it was the first documentary in any game ever that was actually good. Like I have seen so like that was something I've seen so many documentaries. Like there's a thing called like Frag where it doesn't even interview any of the players. There's a documentary called Free to Play that's about like Dota, and it doesn't even really talk about Dota. It just talks about like Dendi and like how his like mom plays like the piano or something like that. there are just so many like garbage documentaries for the most part that like not garbage per se, like they're all put together well, but they're all like just so boring. Like what made the
They missed the
Smash
mark.
doc exactly, yeah, it misses the mark and it misses the it seems like it was more intended to be for Smash was the Smash Brothers was the first documentary that was not only great for introducing people to Smash, but it also was great for people that like were gamers that like you know that is their world. It's not something where it's just like, oh, this is a game where you press like the A button and like a character dies on the screen. It was something that was relatable to both people. And obviously it just told so many like personal stories that just are incredible because I don't think, I mean, Salmax did a good job on it, an excellent job on it, I would say. But it's also he was very lucky to have just such an interesting subject. Like the fact that the five gods are just all so interesting of characters. The fact that just the general history of Smash is so awesome. So the way that I saw it was a lot of journalists that I know were just talking and raving about it and how it was the greatest. And all around you would see the top 10 like esports documentaries ever made. Every single one that I would read about, all of them would put Smash Brothers like at the top. So when I watched it, I had very high expectations and it exceeded those expectations. Granted, now there's like a few things that are probably kind of like a little dated. They probably should like censor some of like the language scenes and whatnot. It's not necessarily perfect, but it is a very human project, a very human like movie series, and um, it's changed my life in a way. So I mean, I owe a lot to it, and I still have a lot of reverence for it, I would say.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. Like everything that you said, I don't have really any familiarity with other esports scene, but I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, this is exactly the sort of thing that I would want to show to somebody who didn't really necessarily understand Melee. And for a lot of people, the fact that they attribute getting into Melee as being a doc kid proves that I wasn't the only one who felt that way, that hundreds of thousands of people who had seen it just immediately went, I have to share this with somebody. And that's really cool that Sandbox was able to capture that. And also the community that he made it for received it so well because they were going, yes, okay, yes, I remember that happening. Oh, this is so cool. Yeah, wow, this editing or the music, or I didn't know that story about that person because it wasn't just here's the gameplay. How cool is that? Which, of course, going back now, we've seen Mango versus Zane in 2021 and Summit 11, so maybe it's not the crispiest of Melee, but it's still Melee. However, the stories just like pull you in, and I think that it's hard to recreate that as well from Samus's perspective for the metagame documentary, which I still thought was good, or for any of us who are trying to make something that is appealing to a person who's never heard of Melee, a casual Melee fan, or a hardcore Melee fan. Like, it is so difficult to capture all three of those things. And for myself, I try to think of it every once in a while where I go, I should try to ask like a few more basic questions sometimes, or be like, what's a wave dash? But I don't know if I really want to do that at the same time either. I just feel like if the story comes across, or if you as Oddball in particular come across well and are represented well, I think that's something that I'm trying to capture and pay tribute to, a piece of media that like is going to always be something that I go back to every once in a while and just go, this is still really cool. I mean, yeah, like you said, probably should be patched in a way, but it's still really cool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's not much more that I could say on it, but I just love it so much in a way.
So when are you going to be able to do something like that? This magnum opus of yours, you said it was coming out soon. So do you have like did you have a rough estimate in time? I think it kind of cut out when you were originally talking about it. I don't want you to tease it too hard either because you're probably trying to keep it under wraps still. So you can share as much as or as little as you want, past the question, whatever.
It's well, I wouldn't say that it's my magnum opus. It's definitely like the most like ambitious piece that I've probably written like for any esport, I would say. Uh, Maybe ever. Probably ever, yeah, I would say. I guess like I mean I have like serialized projects that are probably longer and have like some more ambitious ideas. But yeah, it's definitely like up there. The big things that are like sort of keeping it is it's kind of in purgatory at the moment because this is a call out. I don't know if my editor will watch this, but edit that article because he's been procrastinating it and just refuses to do it 100% because he just is so intimidated by the word count and never wants to touch it. Uh, yeah,
Woo, let's
I mean,
go.
all kidding aside, but yeah, it's just a matter of actually getting it edited. And honestly, one of the things I also want to do is hopefully actually just be able to talk to that player. I haven't actually been able to contact them yet, but I really I think that it's a banger, and hopefully within the next few months, whenever people ever see this, it'll be out and they will be liking it.
Yeah, and you know, I if hopefully it pops off really well, but you would be willing to share that with the player before, and you could talk about it through the lens of the AMSA article or with Ice. Well, wait, hold on. Ice knew what the article is going to be about. He got interviewed for crying out loud, but would you be actually willing to take notes from the person that the article is about? Like, and that can be just generalized to anybody that you would write an article on.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that gets just so much more legitimacy to it because, no matter how much of your heart and soul you put into something, like if you're writing about another person and then the other person just says that's not true, I don't believe that, or like I that's not the reason that I did this, then it kind of delegitimizes it and uh doesn't put it in the best of light. So, I mean. Yeah, I would say that that definitely is something. Granted, it all depends on like the context you're going for. The context I'm going is just like a general historical piece and like sort of analyzing why they came to be so great. But I mean, there are instances probably where you may want to criticize a player. You may want to do something like that, and it can't always be like the most appropriate to like reach them for comment because that can be like incredibly unproductive if they just want to like argue with you then. So. I would say that I would agree that for the most part, yeah, I do. I like reach out to the player, but obviously, depending on the player, if there's someone that's like incredibly successful and incredibly busy, that's just not always realistic. To always respect, to always expect them to be included in it in some sense.
Yeah, it did do be that way sometimes. Like I haven't reached out to like every single person in the Melee community, although I am trying to eventually get to that point. But I've gotten enough no's. Like you were saying earlier, it's just a unique opportunity, maybe compared to the more mainstream, popular League of Legends type stuff, where you have to go through a lot of channels. Whereas with Melee, usually you can get a hold of the person that you're actually trying to talk to because it's not a lot of middle people. Because you know what middle people like? They like money, and there's not a lot of money in Melee. So the good news is that you're still kind of in that sweet spot where people are somewhat approachable and even online, not Slime. By the way, for the record, I didn't ask Slime to come onto the podcast. Let the record show. I just know better than to ask Slime because if you listen to the Ard podcast, which is hilarious, you just know not to ask. But anyway, the all that to say, I'm I love that it's not just like I lost my train of thought, but it's not going to always be a picturesque like, oh, I asked them and they were so generous with their time. At the same breath, in the same breath, you're going to have people who say no, and that's okay. But you've had the courage to ask, and I feel like I've done that as well. So for those of you who are potentially interested in doing either what Oddball you are doing or what I'm doing, it is something that's technically feasible within Melee. You just have to be willing to hear no. It's a little tough sometimes, but also keeps you in check with the ego. Like, look who I got, and then you get a no from somebody else, and you go, oh, and it just evens out in the end.
What I will say though is that I mean, of all, because this isn't, I mean, there are more sort of Wild West like opportunities. I try to do a lot of interviews with like streamers and some like Valorant people, and those are also sort of like the case where it is sort of a Wild West type thing where there isn't a structured and like flowchart way of like how you're supposed to get interviews. It is more you just have to actually personally reach out. The Smash community is by far the most receptive and like the most like generous in terms of like players willing to like give their time. So I think that granted it's not it is like harder in some respects, but if you want to like be able to learn as a journalist and if you want to be able to see good results as a content creator, I think it's a I think it's a community that is heavily underlooked and something that a lot of people should definitely value a lot more.
In the coming months, hopefully that continues to be the case. We made some waves with Summit 11. Ultimate is making waves, and yes, to a certain extent, we're benefiting each other by both succeeded and winning. So hopefully that'll continue in an upward positive direction. Love to see players get sponsored. That's like one kind of immediate symptomatic growth of going, oh, hey, look, that's cool. That doesn't happen because nobody cares. That happens because enough people care, and there's like legitimacy coming in. So and other things like people like yourself being able to pay at least some of the bills or hopefully all of them by writing for Esports Heaven and Inven Global, who I didn't even get to ask you about writing for them. So we'll do that. I'll ask you about that now, what that's like, and then we'll start to wrap up. So you write part-time for them, is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, so for the most part, I just like receive like a monthly salary, not enough to live off of with Esports Heaven, just having like a set amount of pieces every single week. And then for Invent Global, I'm a contributor, which in contract terms is like essentially a freelance role, but that's like I contribute very heavily to that website. I do like several articles a week, and am hopefully expanding their Smash section a lot more because that's actually something that um, wasn't as much of a thing. Traditionally, it's like the separation. I'll just explain Invent Global real quick, just because I think it's an interesting story. But it is the largest Korean sports like esports site in the Eastern world, and they just recently, within the like last few years, expanded and created Invent Global, which is basically like the Western branch where they started doing League of Legends content and stuff like that. It's been doing really well as a site on that front, but obviously they've wanted to grow and expand it to other communities. And I talked with them a lot, and my editor was really receptive to it and agreed with me a lot that the Smash community, even though compared to other games, it's not necessarily the largest, but the community is extremely passionate and extremely like hungry for content. So it's it's just a lovely place to work with. And yeah, hopefully we'll be doing it more soon.
It's an easy way to see in terms of the Golden Guardians signing on 3 more Melee players after re-signing Zane and saying we are going to do all the content, and regularly when they tweet. For the record, their tweets are actually good tweets, so I'm not saying that they're just putting out tweets. They put them out. They get like 1,000+ likes each time. It's just showing the world, hey, we out here, we are living, and we like supporting people who are trying to support us. And so for you, for anybody else out there who's doing stuff for Melee, right on. So, Oddball, please tell the people where they can find you. Unfortunately, the first like 30 seconds or so where I said all the things that you do and where they can find you initially were not recorded, but we can do that now. So, can you please tell everybody where they can find you and who you write for?
Sure. On Twitter, go to @Oddball Creator. That's my Twitter. I'm not the most active on it, probably should be more, but if you want to find retweets of my articles and also sometimes tweets of me talking to players and stuff like that, check me out. That's where you'll find like most of my content. And then obviously esportsheaven.com, you can find a lot of my like feature pieces and stuff. I have a really good piece on SFAT there that I loved writing. And then Invent Global, where you can just find, I'm trying to hopefully be able to do 1 to 2 interviews a week with all your favorite Smash personalities.
I love that. Oddball, thank you so much for joining me on Bottom of the Smash Mountain.
Thank you so much for having me.